All right, welcome. I'm Steve Floyd, and this is a special interview we're doing today. I want to introduce a couple of friends of mine. This is Mindy Juliana.
Hello.
And back here we've got Chris Ripple.
Hello.
And these guys have been involved with something that I am kind of a newcomer to in terms of the mindset of being prepared for all kinds of possibilities. And I say relative newcomer because I've been thinking like a prepper probably for about 5 years or so.
Yeah.
You live in your own farm.
Hi, my name is Mindy, and I'm a prepper.
So it's like Preppers Anonymous?
Hi.
Hi, Mindy.
Raise your hand.
Okay. All right. And Chris, do you have your own farm too?
I do. I have a permaculture-based homestead, the furthest north in the world.
What is a permaculture? Is that
it's based on observation skills and no petro as much as possible. Everything is recycled by using systems that feed
you
back
are a
to
bit
each
of a
other.
low talker. So
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
The feedback
No petro.
system is understanding everything, how they function together, and how the waste streams feed each other, and everything benefits from that coordination.
So when you see living in Alaska, when you say perma anything, I think permafrost, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm a permafrost farmer, but that's not what it is. It's perma in permaculture, like agriculture, permanently.
Correct.
Okay.
A system that feeds itself.
Correct.
So I could basically put you in a glass bottle,
Right.
and you will feed yourself.
He will
Yes.
regenerate.
Wow.
I can't grow arms.
Available for sale shortly. Chris in a bottle. All right. So,
I do not have a permaculture. I have an unsustainable farm that I have to haul a lot of water to myself. I get it delivered now. But
you actually have water tanks because your farm.
I have a giant 1,500-gallon water tank that I get filled by a local water company here because I live outside city limits, and in Fairbanks, Alaska, which is where we live, we don't, unless you have a well or you live in the city limits, you have to procure your own water.
I live in the city limits, and this is one of the reasons why we chose this house when my wife and I were looking, is because she wanted city water. She
Right.
wanted the idea of turn on the faucet, get the water all the time. Now, that works as long as you have somebody out there
Right.
pumping water through the pipes.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I began to worry about, and I don't really worry that much, but I thought about it in terms of, what was it, like 2010 or so, I began to think, well, what would happen if we lost power for more than 3 or 4 days?
That'd be a problem.
Which could happen.
It has happened.
Well, I know it has happened. It's happened here in Fairbanks before. It's happened here in winter before. And so I was thinking in terms of heat source. I was thinking, you know what? Our furnace runs on electricity.
You know, Steve, the points that you're bringing up are the exact reason why so many of us here in the interior, our lifestyles are set up in such a way to prepare for anything that might happen, like you're talking about. If the electricity goes out, if you run out of water, something like that. The whole idea of prepping has some stigmas attached to it where you think, you know, it's like a zombie apocalypse or we're living in bunkers.
Well, that's because a lot of the people who are preppers, people get that mindset from watching TV where it's always the crazy, hi, I'm Prepper Joe, and I've got a bunker, and I've got a...
They're the eccentrics of Alaska that most of us do not even associate with much because they're kind of radical or crazy.
Yeah, but wait a minute. We're kind of
We're considered
eccentric.
crazy.
Still be clear.
It's not even that it's that we don't associate with them. It's that a lot of the crazy people in that sense.
They kind of keep to themselves.
They keep to themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, they have entire conversations with themselves too, which is great.
Hey, if you're that guy, we're not judging you.
I love you.
Really?
Okay, it's all right.
So the whole idea of prepping is to check off as many things in advance of an emergency that you can, so that when an emergency happens, you can focus on other things. So if you have a 3-month supply of food that does not require any electricity, if the electricity goes out, food is already checked off the list. You don't need to worry about that. If you have a heat source that doesn't require electricity, or a water source that's external from an electrical source, If you have those are things in an event of an emergency, an ice storm, an earthquake, a power outage.
An EMP that knocks out
Anything.
all the computers that run
Literally
all of the utilities.
Anything, or if we miss a barge coming up from Seattle, which happens,
Yeah.
you know, these things happen. So if any of these things happen, you've already got these things checked off your list.
And it's a simple way of thinking about things, because it's you're getting out of your animalistic, I've got to find food, I've got to find shelter, I've got to find water. You're getting out of that lizard brain type of thinking where you have no rational thought other than I've got to get at all expense this.
Well, I actually know someone who, I cannot even believe that these words came out of his mouth. He said he's prepared for an emergency because he's got a gun.
Yeah, I've heard that before. And my response when people say, hey, if anything happens, I'll just go out and get what I need. And my response to those people are, so you're planning on killing your neighbor in advance for food or water. Right now, that's the decision that you're making. And that's a poor way of looking at things, because, you know,
horrifying is what it is.
There are people that they do hoard guns and ammo, and that's okay. I have some guns, I'm not afraid to admit, but you have to be more long-sighted than that. If there's an emergency, you can't eat your bullets. And if all you've got is beans and rice and you don't have water or electricity, they're really hard to chew. And so you have to be looking at things a little bit more outside the box of what does your family eat, and do I have a secondary source of electricity or heat? And if you don't, what's your plan? If there's an earthquake, we live in Fairbanks, Alaska, which can be kind of cold. It was 30 or 40 below zero in some parts of town this morning. So if there's an earthquake in the middle of the winter and it's 20 below outside and your windows break, what's your plan? You know, if my windows break, I still have a source of heat, but it's going to suck because it's cold in the house.
Right.
So
and even then, you have different levels of preparation, too, because if you have a bunch of plastic to put over your windows, you're not going to be running around at 30 below doing all your windows at once. So what you might want to have is, say, like one room that's already ready so that you can
you could, if
go
you've
to
got that kind of space. But I think that having blankets that can immediately be put up. Yeah, we're down here in the bat cave, in the eggshell cave. So if you have that space, but not everybody has an excess room like that. But if you do have plastic or blankets that you can put over the windows while you're preparing,
you could even set up a tent inside,
you could set up a tent
inside your living room.
That's actually the first course of action. Is you get a tent set up. You want to make sure you have some warm blankets and some. There's a lot of things that you can do, and I think we're getting too detailed.
Exactly, and
right.
This is. I mean, this is kind of an introduction to the idea of prepping, and so I do want to be able to paint with a
and
kind of a broad.
We don't want to come across as a total nutheads, which we feasibly just could have done. So.
Hi, I'm Steve, and I don't know who this woman is.
I'm a prepper. So
okay, what is prepping? I mean, try to get the stigma out of it.
So preparing in advance for anything. So if you have a test coming up,
right,
what are you going to do for the test?
Study.
Right, you're going to prepare for the test, right?
Right.
You're going to get into the mindset for whatever that test is going to be on. So you're going to study the different subjects. Your teacher's giving you a lot of notes. You're going to review your notes. You're going to get ready to take that test. You're going to prepare. Right.
Which is why I hated pop quizzes, because you could never really be prepared unless you were always studying.
So, exactly. Thank you for bringing that up, Steve. So what happens in a pop quiz is that you get to find out how prepared you really are.
How much have you been studying the material on your own?
Right.
Are you keeping up like you're supposed to be, or do you cram, which is what I used to do?
Right. So if you do things under pressure, then you're really not prepared. But if you're preparing for an exam, you're going to do all the things that you need to do, and it depends on the kind of grade you want to get. So if you're an A student, you might prepare differently than if you're a C student for the same exam. So it just depends on how far you want to go with something. But whatever you're going to do, you should prepare for it in advance.
But also do it in a logical means where you think about it. Think about it. Don't do it out of fear. Do it out of knowledge and concern and care and respect for one another and the places we live. if we don't respect that as our basic values,
Then you're going back to that
Then
issue of
what are
I've got
we
a
doing?
gun and I'm just going to take
then
Right.
I'm going to take what I need.
So you've got a core philosophy of preparation. I have a core philosophy of preparation. So before I do anything, I'm going to think about what are the steps that I need to take in advance. And before I'm going to do something, I'm going to check as many things off the list as I can.
Mindy's demonstrating how Italian she is with all of the hand motions.
Don't judge me!
I'm not, not judging at all. It's fantastic. However, I keep worrying that you're going to just knock the microphone and it's going to go flying.
All right, I'll sit on my hands.
No, don't sit on your hands
You know what
either.
happens
Then
when
that
an
looks,
Italian
You
sits
might
on her hands?
explode.
she can't talk? Okay. Thanks, Mindy.
All right, okay, so anyway, as I was saying.
It's good. Keep talking.
Yeah, as I was saying. So the more prepared you are in advance, the more things you can check off your list before something happens. The electricity goes out. Hey, you don't have to worry about it because you've got a water source, you've got a heat source, you've got a light source, and you've got a food source. Yes. So the electricity goes out. Now, what do you have to worry about? Well, you don't have to worry about the most important things, so you can be thinking about your neighbors.
Yeah.
One of the beautiful things about being prepared is the more prepared in advance you are for something, the less afraid you are.
Totally.
And actually, you start anticipating. I was talking on the phone with my Sicilian mother down in Florida, and
How do you talk on the phone with an Italian?
we both had to put it on speakerphone. We had to put it on speakerphone.
All right. So you're talking with your Sicilian mother, and she's
Yeah.
in Florida?
She lives in Florida, and we were talking about preparing in advance for things. And I mean, I was kind of raised like this. And so we always had a lot of food in the freezer and a lot of food in the cans. My mom was a canner. And if you're ready for something, you just simply don't have to worry. You're not afraid. You can then anticipate. So we had a storm last week, and it was supposed to be high winds. We might have lost electricity. Some people did. I get excited because I get to test out. I get to crazy, not stupid. I get to check. I get to test out my systems that are in place.
Yeah.
You know, I have a 55-gallon drum of water in my bathroom. Let's be clear, people. I don't want a 55-gallon drum of water in my bathroom, but it's there just in case because we had a couple series
right.
of storms. Right? And so having that accessible, so in advance of a storm, I can just bring it in the house, fill it up from the bathroom nozzle, and boom, I've got it ready to go. I can use that water for other things now.
We've mentioned water, we've mentioned food, we've mentioned heat, light obviously is something that, you know, especially
I should have kept it on, huh?
in Alaska, like while we're here, you know, you've got, and which that's great as long as you've got a
battery for it.
supply of batteries. But yeah,
Which, you know, I
candles.
do.
I mean, obviously the
Rechargeable.
old school way of lighting things, even kerosene lamps or whatever. So
The lamps are great, and they're actually very atmospheric, and so it actually makes you feel very cozy when you've got things like that. And making sure that you've got extra lamp oil is certainly for heat, and they actually give off a little bit of heat too.
yes, yeah.
And so
And I like some of the. There are some lamps that are better than others. For instance, if you rely on a propane light and you're in a closed room,
Can be a problem.
not a good idea.
you could. I mean, I know somebody that was trying to heat himself using a little propane cook stove in a tent, and he ended up dying
Right.
because he ended up giving himself carbon monoxide poisoning.
That can
Ventilation
happen.
is important.
Yeah,
Use your
ventilation,
head
yeah.
just as well. Not
Yeah.
crazy.
Crazy,
So,
not stupid.
Food,
That's my
water,
motto.
heat, light. What about getting rid of the poop?
Oh yeah, because everybody poops. Sanitation is really important, and if like in my bathroom, I have a 55-gallon drum, I can flush my toilet normal, right?
No.
Because I can just fill up my tank, and
No.
then my toilet.
If you don't have
flushes
water
normal.
coming into your house, the toilet's not going to work.
Right, and also you can't boil water if you don't have water coming into
Right,
your house. If you don't
exactly.
if you have electric stove.
And if it's wintertime, you might not be able to go down to the river and grab yourself some water. I mean, you could do
Melt
it really old
snow.
school and grab some chunks of ice. I know some people that did that.
Sure.
Back in the old days, they actually bring it in and melt it.
It takes a vulgar amount of snow to make
Yeah.
a cup of water. So
10%.
yeah, it's really well up here. I think it's even less because our snow's
Snow
so
is
dry.
so powdery, exactly.
Yeah, so you want to make sure that you've got sanitation. There's actually 7
So
really
we've
important
hit
ones.
them: food, water, heat, light, sanitation. The other ones are medical
And security.
and security. So, and thinking medical, we're not just talking about a first aid kit like you get at your local Walmart.
Well, it's not a bad place to start.
No, but, I mean, you ought to learn. I learned how to stitch by stitching a friend.
Yes.
Well, I think everybody should take a CPR class as a minimum.
He didn't want me to stitch him. He didn't. But he was bleeding a lot. And I explained to him.
We had a radio show
Yeah.
for a year and a half together, and I've heard you tell this story before.
But
They have not heard
okay.
this, yeah.
So this friend of mine, we were out camping. It was winter time. We had brought along, just in case of medical emergency, a little bit of whiskey to be able to, clean out the wound if something happened. We got into that for a non-medical, and I think that might have had to do with why he ended up with the axe missing the wood and he hit his leg. And so the axe went actually into his bone, and he's bleeding.
And you're in a remote location.
We are about 120 miles outside of Fairbanks, and we've got his 4 boys and 3 of mine with us. So at this point, we're looking at the option. Do we get everybody in the car? And now we didn't all fit in one car to begin with to get up there. So we'd have to literally stack people in the back in order for me to drive the dad down to the hospital. Or do I take one of my bullets, open it up, pour some gunpowder on it, and light a match, cauterize the wound? He didn't like that option either. Or do I stitch him up?
Thank God you had whiskey.
I was going to say, what was the antiseptic supply like after
God,
that?
you had whiskey. Antiseptic, man.
That I explained that we had gotten into the whiskey before the incident happened.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, what ended up happening was after the bandages failed and he was still bleeding at 4 in the morning. This had happened at like 10 o'clock at night. He's still bleeding. He's finally like, stitch me. And so I stitched him up and we stopped the bleeding. And the next day, he's like, hey, let's go hunting. And so we hunted before going back into town.
Stitching material is cheap. It's easy to find. You can get it from probably most of your friends probably have some laying around somewhere or another. You can get a hold of it. Super glue is another very quick, easy repair. We've got trees that supply all sorts of natural
pine
stuff.
pitch can really do some wonders.
pitch is
And
wonderful.
we're getting deeper into this category. This could be its own podcast just on medical supplies, and maybe we'll end up doing a podcast just
sure.
on. But so once again,
And the last one is security.
Yeah.
And security is a really important element to prepping, depending on the kind of emergency situation that's at hand. You think of security in a situation of martial law, security in a situation where maybe there's a burglar running, that's rampant. We just had two home invasions
yep.
in Fairbanks
on the same night.
on the same night in a neighborhood.
Morning, actually, I think, right?
And those people have not been caught.
Right.
And so
In
going
one
into
case, they
people's
went right
houses-
past somebody who was asleep to take their guns.
Yeah, that's no bueno. So in a situation like that, right now, we actually do have an emergency situation in Fairbanks where there are people who are entering homes at night. They must have no fear. And that's something that you can prepare a little bit in advance for by having outside lighting, by having dogs that are going to bark, by locking your doors. Both homes had their doors unlocked.
Duh.
Right.
Yeah, but I must say that in Fairbanks, Alaska,
we leave our trucks running outside, unlocked every day.
we've got
Some
this
people
big
apparently
culture.
leave their trucks running with their kids in them when they run inside.
I know, right? So it depends on the kind of security, but if there's outside lighting to secure your property regardless for some sort of, there are criminals out there that might want to come take your stuff. And so you can do some really basic preparations, or you can go all crazy and put an 8-foot fence that's got, Constantino wire around it. You can barricade yourself, but I don't really think most normal, sane people want to live within a barricade.
Why do you put yourself in a prison? Better
Right.
to know your neighbors.
There's
Right.
Better
again,
tell your
that would
neighbors.
require forethought and actual advanced
That's right.
work.
Well, in my
Is
neighborhood,
it's work
we're
to get to
doing
know your
that.
neighborhood.
Well, in our neighborhood, I live in kind of a remote neighborhood. I'm actually one of the organizers for Community Watch, and we're actually going to be going house to house
no.
to get as many people on a phone tree, and creating a phone tree for our neighborhood so that people can get to know each other. And what I found in just a couple of months of doing this, super interesting. We just went out to lunch, and a lady stopped me, and she said, "Hey, I'm in your Community Watch. What's going on with that?"
Nice.
People wave to each other on the street when they're driving now.
Well, I'm
more conscientious
the
of how
idea
I
of
drive.
knowing who your neighbor is in the first place. you might end up finding out that your neighbor has a skill that's going to be useful in the case of an emergency, and to volunteer the skills that you have, too, to say, hey, if the power goes out, come on over. I got a bunch of extra sleeping bags. We'll make a slumber party out of it. Whatever.
I don't need electricity for heat, but do you have a chainsaw?
Yeah.
Right? And so you can make those sorts of, getting to know your neighbors, which in some areas is kind of
You
hard
mentioned
to do.
the winter storm that happened, what was it, like 2 years ago? The high wind where it knocked out power to all of Fairbanks. And in some cases, they didn't get power back on for a week.
Right.
The day after the storm, when the power was still out, I was so proud. 3 of my teenage boys took it upon themselves to just go around the neighborhood, door to door, and check on people.
Excellent.
Yeah. So,
hey, you know
we're
what?
at 20 minutes
We
here.
need to wrap this up here, but once again, we've got these 7 topics: food, water, heat, medical, light, security, and sanitation. In no particular order, because they're all important, or is there one?
Important. Well, no, I think they're all important. I think that, if you wanted to get started, the first thing that I would recommend getting started with is get a little headlamp with some extra batteries. It's a good thing to have anyway. I would recommend just making sure that when you go grocery shopping, when your favorite foods go on sale, just buy a month's supply extra and put it aside. And if you can do that, if you can buy a week's supply or a month's supply of your favorite food when they go on sale, your foods in your grocery stores all go on sale twice a year. Everything. I figured that out. So if you can get to a 6-month supply, you're literally always buying your food on sale. Always. And you will, in the long run, save money. But it takes time to build up that little nest egg of food. And you want to be buying foods that you will eat. If you don't eat tuna fish, don't buy tuna fish for your storage.
That means you can't eat all of it.
No, you don't. You just eat. What you do is you take whatever you need for a week and you put it on the shelf and you put everything else away. Yeah. You have a savings account.
And so the next time you need it, you don't just go and take it out of the storage.
No, you
go and you buy some more.
And then
or
for that,
cycle it through.
Yeah.
Well, but no, not for the first 6 months. You don't cycle it through for the first 6 months. You don't start cycling through your food until you can get onto that your food is always on sale. Right. So when your favorite thing goes on sale again, then you can buy a 3-month supply and then put that on the back of your storage, take a 3-month supply and put it in your cupboard.
In your regular, yeah.
Right. And that's the way that you do things. Like, and that's what I do. Like, my favorite dish soap just went on sale. And it's a true story. And I have dish soap, right? I have it's a little organic thing or whatever, it's natural products. And it went on sale, and it was $1 off per container. So I bought 8 of them, right? Because literally it was the only thing in my cart, because when I go grocery shopping, I literally only buy things that are on sale. Yeah. Unless there's an impulse buy.
So there is an action point for where to start. And if you want to learn more, keep watching this space. We're going to have more podcasts, hopefully on a weekly basis, maybe even.
I think we're talking about that. It'd be pretty fun.
And if you have any questions or any suggestions, email me, steve@radiofreespeech.com, and look for this video and more like it on a separate page called Interviews at radiofreespeech.com. Interviews.
All right. And so thanks so much for tuning in. Chris Ripple, Mindy Juliana.
And Steve Floyd.
He's the